Hi, Holly. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just got back from Tucson. So I do these things called immersions where it's like a deep dive with clients. So it's an in-person work. And through the span of a few days, we dug in and, we logged about 8 to 10 hours. Right. And so it's pretty intensive work. And as a coach, it's one of my favorite things is trying to figure out how do we hit the next level? What's holding us back? We have to start to conceptualize what that next level might look like. And then as you start to measure, like, okay, who do I need to become? We're confronted with things that are in opposition to that. And so that's a big part of what we do here. And you've actually experienced one of these immersions, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, this time well spent, but it
Yeah.
was intense.
So as you reflect on it, I guess, what do you feel like? Is it overkill or is it actually a nice little balance where it sets the stage for so much more?
Well, I personally don't think it's overkill. It was a nice, yeah, like a nice catalyst into the next thing and sort of like deep because of the conversation kind of going in the directions that it goes, which is hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. You just sort of come out the other side and there's like a different level of, for me, it was like a different level of calm and sort of clarity about like where I wanted to go next. Yeah. And it really there was a big thing that happened in mine and my husband's life pretty quickly following you being
Mhm.
here for the immersion. And I do think it set that up to like some of the negative side of that situation to move through really quickly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of reflecting on clients that have gone through that process. Yeah, this is like a deeper level of calm and centeredness around, maybe what would traditionally be big problems. They're a lot more manageable and easier. And yeah, generally because it's an overload, you're just you're hitting so many different dynamics that it does take about a week or two to catch up, right? Where there's an integration process where it kind of feels like you're not, and when it settles in, it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about self-sabotage. It's essentially getting in our own way. This is a common pattern. No one likes to say they self-sabotage, but we all
Right.
do. Right. So we just want to kind of create awareness around why that is, maybe some strategies to move through it. And also in that process, develop some self-compassion. This permission to evolve idea is okay. There's a part of me that wants to stay stuck and I need to bring a little bit of a softer approach. It's not this hardcore, I'm going to like force myself to change. I'm going to understand myself at a deeper level. And as I unpack that, I start to move forward pretty naturally. And so that's what we're doing is we're unpacking a lot of these protection mechanisms, or survival instincts, coping mechanisms. And you may ask what the difference between those things are. They're
Right.
different, saying the same thing, depending on your terminology. But basically, I have a stressful thing happening and my mind wants to avoid it. So I create these workarounds. So if I'm in conflict with what I'm trying to accomplish, our mind is going to have these predetermined escape routes for us. That's what self sabotage is. I'm going to do things that are directly going to sabotage what I'm trying to create. And then these are on a subconscious level. And as we bring awareness to them, like you'll start to create that space where you could see, like, oh, yeah, this thing I'm doing is actually in direct conflict, right? This was a big thing. Obviously, self-worth is this kind of huge kind of core belief. A lot of people adopt a low self-worth, and that's why we don't believe we can achieve bigger and better things, right? So, reflecting back on my baseball journey, all these things, it was just always this never feeling good enough. So that might not be like showing up fully for important events or maybe even being late
Right.
for things or, it's just not able to adopt that level of professionalism that you need to hit the next level. We all have these energy leaks, these things that, can make it very difficult to do the logical thing we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
You see this a lot with the most common one I would say is more of like a weight loss journey. And so that you generally, well, especially in America today with the food quality and all that stuff, it's like it's a common struggle people have, where it's like, yeah, I want to take these actions, but then what happens when heavy emotions get activated? It basically pulls us and snaps us back into what we normally do.
Right.
That's our mindset's just trying to keep the status quo going. So if we're going to shift, we want to basically unwind and rewire to support what we're trying to accomplish. I like to adopt a pretty clean pace to growth and development. Maybe you can shine a light on this where it's not like I'm
Sure.
asking you to jump off a cliff all the time, right? We build up to things.
Right. Yeah, I would say that's definitely true through what we've worked on. It's been a step, mostly small steps along the way. And sometimes that builds to taking a bigger leap depending on the situation, right? Or maybe pushing it just a little further. But generally, it's the smaller, very sustainable steps.
And there's a reason we do that, right? Because our systems wire based on our past. And if I've had, traumas or if I expect disappointment and letdown or just painful things, my mind's always trying to protect me from those things. In the effort to do that, we create more of a routine, a kind of I build this somewhat of a bubble around my life where I have predictable patterns. And if we challenge those too much and there's still a lot of the pain from the past intact, basically we can have a shutdown happen where my
Right.
mind goes extremely negative. I'm not able to show up the way I want to. And if I bite off more than I can chew, I might have a build in the negative direction if I have a really bad experience there, right? Let's say I'm not
Right.
ready to take the step and I do. Now that further puts me in this place of I don't feel like I can do this, right? Because I just logged another experience that has pain attached to it that now I feel like it's even harder to accomplish, right? So everything, it's like we want to do it at a pace that is manageable. So this idea of self-sabotage is simply there's things from my past that are unresolved and I'm shooting for a new goal. There's something I want to accomplish. I have this desire. As I move towards that, my past is going to reveal itself. It's going to show me what I believe about that situation. And so if I have a survival instinct or a coping mechanism attached to some of these stresses that puts me into avoidance or shutdown or extreme negative thinking, it's going to be very hard to continue to move forward. And so that's why we want to address that stuff because it
Right.
might have just too much behind it where we're actually, it's not to the benefit for us to continue to move forward. We need to address this thing first, take some of that energy out of it so that it's easier to take the step. Right. So that's things. It's like and how much data do I have behind it? So this is what we're going to look at is, sometimes it's not like a big trauma that I'm trying to protect myself. Sometimes it's an accumulation of a similar theme. Let's say if I haven't found my voice yet, right? It might be like my voice doesn't matter, right? Or
Sure.
nobody hears me or I'm misunderstood. So I might have many, many experiences that point to some conclusion. And so what's safe to me is going to be like, yeah, maybe what we've worked on a little bit, right? With like
Yeah.
kind of shyness, that ability to speak up, right? Or if I spoke up and it caused actual maybe physical harm or deep emotional pain, that's going to be more in that trauma category, right?
Right.
It can be a big event or it could be an accumulation of smaller things where it's like I don't really see reality any other way other than through that lens. Uh, this is how people respond to me, and so this is what I believe about myself. That goes back to last week, we were talking about identity shift and how do I outgrow who I believe I am. Self-sabotage is an important part of that mix. And, actually kind of piggybacks on a conversation you and I had earlier today of we may have this initial catalyst that pushes us to take action, but then, sometimes as we stick with the uncomfortableness of that, we might have a big reaction to something, but then it might over time, it's gonna get dialed back down, and we're gonna kinda settle back into our default,
Right.
right?
Right.
We all have these things within us, and the goal is to get to this place of I'm gonna be persistent and determined, and so I'm gonna understand part of this change and growth process is gonna be a little bit of sitting in that discomfort and continuing to move through it until I get to the other side of it. So there's not always a clear timeline on that, but that's really how change happens is I just have to commit to something over a period of time until I start to see the progress in that direction. And so that is going to be working through a lot of self-doubt. It's going to be working through a lot of these things of like, oh, I have this pattern where I want to retreat or I want to
Right.
do this action that's very comfortable for me, but on the other side of self-sabotage, it's always gonna be shame, It's always going to be because like we're going to come in and justify like, oh, I did this because, we're going to have an excuse, but underneath it is just this, oh, I didn't rise to the occasion. I didn't meet the challenge. I actually proved more that I can't follow through. I can't take the steps necessary. So that's the shame kind of perpetuates itself of not believing ourselves or trusting us to take the actions necessary to follow what we say we want. And, that's
Yeah.
a big piece there.
Yeah. When I think about examples of self-sabotage, just to sort of ground it in reality, and maybe you can tie back to how it might come from the past, I think of things like maybe not sticking to a timeline for something, and that comes back to that procrastination piece, but maybe oh, it's the big I'll just use a current one, right? It's like, okay, like in my own house, right? So if we have like a big remodel project or something, it could be putting off actually finishing it or only doing it halfway, and it starts to become an issue in terms of actually getting something done and moving forward and being able to take the next step of whatever it is. Is that
Mhm.
making sense?
Yeah. I would say if we're talking about self-sabotage, I would say the most real example we can have is procrastination, putting things off. A lot of success or reaching a goal and like it's just like following through on things until it's done. Right.
Right.
And I think there's this expectation that, okay, if I start something, it's just going to be kind of a straight line because we do think very linearly, right? So it's just like,
Right.
okay, I'm starting this and then I'm going to put the work in and then it's just going to get completed over time or I'm going to reach this deadline. But that's where emotions come into play, right? Where it's like, we're not linear because we're not robots. Okay. We
Right.
have these things within us that pull us in different directions and pull us off track. Okay. So that's the name of the game when we're talking about self sabotage. When the emotions get activated, when I'm confronted with, yeah, this idea of, oh, this project's not getting completed. And so my mind starts pulling up all the times that I delayed or didn't finish things. Right. And then
Right.
that attaches to our identity if I become a person that can't follow through. Right. Or
Right.
or I don't trust myself to take the necessary action all the way to completion. But that's the thing is it's an emotional game every time. And so I'm going to do this. I set the intention to do it. I start doing it. And then life happens. Things get in the way. I did get disconnected from the goal. I get disconnected from the project. And because my negative emotions get activated from the past. So something happens that's going to like pull my focus. Our mind fixates on survival. Okay. And it fixates on who we believe we are. Okay. So if I'm the person that doesn't complete things,
Right.
now I'm going to prove that. So when I go to do it, as I get closer to it, I'm going to have actually more and more backlash going on internally. My mind's going to be attacking me because I'm the person that doesn't complete things. And so it's going to be even heavier, like the closer I get to actually finishing something. We have to know that what we're feeling is things from the past and it's actually stuff that it's negative things, limiting beliefs that we believe about ourselves. Right.
Right.
And, this is, so as I'm taking all these new steps business wise, I factor that into the equation of like, okay, and I've even asked you, I'm like, yeah, hey, set some deadlines for me, whatever. Right.
Sure. Right.
'Cause I can get stuck into, oh, I'm like working on things, perpetually.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's good to be okay on this day, we're doing this. And so in that place, I can kind of rein my mind in and be okay, I have to have it done there. And in that place, I get like a little bit of an adrenaline rush that like keeps me powering through. But because there is this, I struggle with procrastination. I think many people do relative to certain subjects, right? You might be good at going to the gym every day, but you might, struggle in other areas, right? And so that's
Right.
just going to be that there's more pain attached to it. Let's say, especially if you've had like a lot of failures and letdowns and disappointments, things like that, where I don't actually feel like the work I'm putting in is going to be fruitful. So there's almost like part of me that's giving it half effort to prove that right. Right. So all these things, so the identity shift and the self-sabotage, it's like a hand in hand thing where it's, ultimately my system's set up to continually recreate what I believe about that situation. And
Right.
so with that, I might have intense negative emotions come up. when I go to complete something. And so, it's like, all right, I know I'm taking new steps. And so I have to build in this buffer that it's not going to be like this linear progression. I'm going to feel good some days, other days, my mind's going to be kind of fixated on like why it's not going to work or why it's not good enough. And it's just continually realigning to be like, no. And that's where determination is important. Okay. Because that's what allows us to work through, kind of the wave that hits us is I'm so dialed in and attached to making this happen that, I can weather those storms. I can basically ride that wave. And, as it starts to dissipate, now I can continue back on my path. When we're in stress, our mind starts replaying old tapes and it goes back to old patterns. Okay. And
Yeah.
the default is it's because that's what's very efficient for us. We talked a little bit about willpower last week, where willpower allows us to override things temporarily. Okay. But if the negative emotion is engaged on a regular basis, like, that's going to pull the willpower away. That's why I want to go into what I'm actually feeling. I want to come to peace with whatever's holding me back. Okay.
Right.
And so that's going to be that deeper issue of what am I trying to protect myself from by delaying this, right? By not taking the necessary actions, or actually by taking actions that are in direct conflict with what I'm trying to accomplish. So we all have these things, and it's going to be based on, where we have low confidence, where we don't have like a lot of, maybe skills or knowledge, right? It's just a very kind of just shallow development in a certain area. We're not going to know what it takes to have the follow through there. Okay. And
Yeah.
that's where we have experts and like accountability people like, hey, like, yeah, this is what you do here. Because, part of it, we might just be confused on what the next step is, right? We might not have clarity on it. And so we might sit in this place of, just kind of, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to pretend. And that might take me way off track, right? Because if I don't
Sure.
have the map to the destination, I might be building in the wrong direction.
Right.
So all these things are context, like, okay, what's going on here? Why am I sabotaging? So it's a lack of skill. So I haven't built up the skill set necessary to execute. Knowledge, I have a very shallow understanding of whatever this is. So my mind's not able to properly fill in the gaps about what it's going to look like to progress here.
Right.
Or I'm protecting myself from pain. So some sort of
Yeah.
failure, disappointment, trauma, maybe whatever this is, yeah, maybe there was somebody that I feel like sabotage things for me. This
Sure.
could be a sports coach, right? Maybe if I'm on a
Yeah.
sports team in high school and, I didn't get the chance to play, or I was set up, in situations where to fail, things like that. I might not have gotten a fair shake at things. And so that's where we could go into victimhood, where it feels like this is out of my control. Okay.
Right.
And, with all this coaching, we're always talking about, okay, so as an adult, what do I have power over to change? And because that's the thing is we have this now, and it may feel like we don't have that power now, but that's because earlier in our life, there are a lot of situations where we didn't have power.
Right.
And that's where the sabotage comes from, is like when we actually didn't have the ability to pursue whatever it is we wanted, right? Our mind is functioning from this immature place of, hey, like last time I tried to do this, this happened. But,
Right.
or did I actually choose that? Was that something I genuinely wanted? Was that something I was forced to do? Like that kind of stuff. We start asking these questions. Given this situation, did this like failure even matter to you? Right. Like, especially growing up, we're doing things that we're not connected to that, okay. Like a good example here would be if I get bad grades in school, I might think I'm not intelligent. But that, most like successful entrepreneurs do terrible in school, right? Because
Right.
they don't learn that way. It's more about doing and that kind of thing. So it's just context matters, personal preferences matter, like all these things where it's, well, what environment was I in that created these limiting beliefs or the negative self-image? And how do I move through that? It's like I almost have to go back to be like, yeah, I had to do school, but I hated it every step of the way. And so I was like
Right.
forcing myself to do things. And that got me out of touch with what I really wanted and who I am. I started
Right.
to disconnect in order to survive in that type of environment. Right. And
Right.
so is that valid data for us moving forward where I have free choice to do whatever I want? Okay.
Right.
We're always trying to kind of measure that. It was a painful struggle, but I was told this is what you have to do. I still might be
Right.
believing those things as an adult, right? And that might not be proper for what's going on in my life.
So if somebody wants to break these self-sabotage patterns, whatever they might be, if it's procrastination or if it's sort of, selling yourself short in some way to kind of justify why things didn't work out for you or whatever it might be. What would you, give people as tips around finding their way out of that?
I would say first, we want to be connected to something that's actually meaningful to you. There's so many things because that's what's like going to give us enough energy to kind of fight through the battle. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's like finding clarity on like what's actually very important to you, what's meaningful for you. It is doing a little bit of that soul searching to get more in tune because, so many of us like go through life and it's just like, well, it's like whose life am I living? Right. Like it's like
Right.
I don't feel like I chose a lot of these things. And so with this journey, with this work, we're always getting back in tune with that of like, what do I actually want? Right. And because that's so important, it's foundational because, and it doesn't have to be like a career, but it could be like I'm trying to achieve this type of lifestyle or something like that, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, maybe if I want freedom and flexibility, it could be okay. Well, like I just need to start some sort of online business, but it's
Right.
not. Maybe I want to use my skill sets, but that's not the main focus. My main focus might be the freedom piece. I think it's like giving yourself permission to think differently and kind of open things up. And we have to start to ask those questions, with all this work of what do I really want? How do I want to live my life? And and generally that's going to be different than what we're currently living. And so
Right.
so there is going to be conflicts to work out. There's going to be there are going to be aspects of us that don't believe it's possible and that are going to because we don't believe it's possible, we are going to self-sabotage. So just like we're talking about procrastination, one way to help prevent that is like deadlines, but then there's also on the follow through aspect, we actually may want to extend timelines to
Yeah.
give us that wiggle room to work through the kinks as we're taking the steps. Okay.
Right.
Because if I try to take too many steps too fast, that's going to shut me down. So that's kind of step two is like I have to ask myself once I find something like meaningful that I feel like I want to pour some energy into. Now I have to look at the context of my life and I have to start to align the pieces to support that and so I have to ask, like, yeah, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to give up? How am I willing to make this fit in? Okay.
Right.
And and kind of that's where we develop that self-compassion of like, hey, this is what I've been doing. If we've been doing it a long time, it's very practice and we're not going to be able to see alternate routes from that place. Okay. So I know it is going to be a little bit of a struggle because I have to start to conceptualize how this new piece is going to fit in. So there's gonna be parts of me that doesn't that's always functioning in doubt on some level because if I've never done anything before, like it doesn't become real until I get really, really close to it. Okay.
Right.
It's so I'm extending the timeline. I'm allowing myself to wrestle with things. Okay. That's that importance of sitting in discomfort is these things aren't like an automatic thing, right? I know as I start to take steps and we generally want to take smaller steps to start off with
Right.
because we don't want to get overloaded with too many conflicting dynamics that are going on. It's like it's okay to work through one conflict, but if I'm trying to take a massive step, now I'm confronted with so many aspects that might be out of alignment. So that's going to feel overwhelming. Okay. And so, that's the common thing you hear from people is like, as I go to take change or make a change, I hit overwhelm pretty quickly. Right.
Yeah.
Because your mind's trying to shift and manage like, okay, I'm doing the best I can, but this isn't normal for me. Right. And
Right.
that takes extra brain power. That's a little bit, you're learning this new skill of video editing and things like, it's problem
Yeah.
solving, right? And
Yeah.
it takes like you take conscious brain power to be like, okay, I'm willing to fail at this. I'm willing to make mistakes. And you have to give yourself that room to, to take that journey to be a beginner. And
Right.
most people like the ego doesn't like that. Okay.
Yeah.
The ego thinks like we should be perfect at it the second we start doing it. And that's where we have to get some perspective. And that's where the past does help, where it's just like, when you're a baby, you get to learn to walk or whatever,
Right.
it's like,
Exactly.
did that like happen immediately? It's like skill development. It's pretty good to look at how like a child progresses because like that's a realistic time frame.
Right.
Because that's a very natural thing of you're starting from zero and now you're trying to build into something. And so there are just going to be layers and levels to that to deepen your learning of it. And let's say like the people that are the best at anything, they've worked through those kinks and then they've gotten to the
Right.
point where something's like very boring for them because it's like automatic. It becomes
Right.
unconscious, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about here is it's like this, we want to understand the journey and our mind's going to be telling us now.
Right. So you made me think of a question related to the comparison side of this, right? So I think, right, like it's very like totally makes sense that we would be learning a new skill, and doing this podcast and the video associated with that is like a example of that for me. So every week it gets a little more natural using the software, getting the sound how I want it to sound and all the things. But I'm thinking about in this frame of self-sabotage, is there a comparison piece that you would say plays in? Because you might look at the best in the world, right, and be like, well, yeah, it needs to be like that right away,
Yeah. Yeah.
and stop yourself, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge one, right? It's like, well, and that ties in with the discomfort piece too of being like, hey, just because I'm here and I'm measuring myself against somebody that's been at this a very long time, that's not a fair comparison. I wanna look to that for inspiration.
Right.
I wanna be like, oh yeah, I really like how this person does it. But I always want to bring it back to myself and be, I'm going to have my own unique style, or I'm going to have the way I
Right.
do it. But it's like,
Yeah.
I need to struggle through that to figure that out. Because when we talk about strategies, you could become like a carbon copy of somebody else, and
Sure.
that's a road, I guess. It's never really interested me. But yeah, comparison could shut us down immediately. And so very much so, I want to, if somebody's like really far along, that's kind of like a role model. That's somebody I'm looking up to in terms of they've developed this skill at a high level. And I'm not comparing myself to that person. Okay. I'm
Right.
more inspired by that person. And because, a lot of people, they do that and then they think they should be at that place without putting all the work in. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And that work that's years in the making. Okay. And that's real. And we don't understand that with social media now, where it's, I'm supposed to have all these things figured out right now. Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's like it's giving yourself that runway to work with. So yeah, I'm learning something new. I may hit a point where I might be kind of natural at something. I might have a natural inclination to it. And so I might like actually experience a little bit of success there pretty early on. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh and so that might be a false positive where I'm like, oh, I think I'm better than I am. Okay.
Okay.
And so that's going to be like, I'm taking a step and, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this. And yeah, maybe I have this kind of pre-built unique perspective that I'm adding to it. And that's helping me. That's the talent. But mastery is this ability to apply that dynamic in a million different ways. Okay.
Right.
And that's through experience and that's through working through all the problems. So a lot of times I'll have a little bit of early success and then I hit a roadblock that I don't know how to solve. Okay. And a lot of people shut down and they throw it all away. Okay. That's
Yeah.
another piece
Yeah.
is this ability those problems are actually to develop you so you can be further along and gain actual confidence in what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's it. Everything does take work. And that's a reality that, I think a lot of people are reluctant to face. Everybody wants to be this finished product right now. And that's why we need something meaningful enough that you want to put the work in to develop it because it is a consistent thing over time. And as I'm working through it, I'm going to be confronted with all these things from my past that are in conflict with it. And we have to reconcile those to really start to cement in this like authentic confidence to be, I know exactly what I'm doing here. And I'm dynamic with it, meaning I can apply it to many different situations. And so with triathlon, it's a bike course or something, right? So,
Yeah.
oh, I'm only good at like, as long as the conditions are perfect on like what I train on regularly, like I can do
Right.
well.
Yeah.
But, when I'm confronted with kind of more of a hilly corp or, different temperatures, like all that stuff, now
Right.
maybe I shut down. Maybe I don't do that well. Right. And so, yeah, mastery is like being okay no matter what the situation is. Right. And you might
Right.
be a little bit stronger here and there, but you've put in enough work that like you see it as like one thing. Oh, it's like it's cycling. Right. It's not,
Yeah.
I'm not like viewing all the exceptions because that's an immature knowledge base is like, just operating on that level of I do good here, so I should do good over here. Well, if you don't have experience over there, you're not going to do good there.
Right.
Or if you do, it's kind of because maybe your body's pretty well wired for that type of situation, and it might be kind of a talent for you, right?
Sure.
But if I'm going to be dynamic with something, I need to learn all the different angles on it. And so that's what comes over time. And so we don't see that as a beginner. So if I'm comparing myself to somebody that's like mastered it and that's far along,
Right.
um, in the coaching world, this is common, right? You go to a workshop and read a couple books, and then now it's like you know everything about life, right? And
Sure.
but it's like no, it's like you have to have a ton of experience behind it for it to
Right.
actually be impactful and meaningful because everything is complex and it's when we like learn the complexities and then bring it back to being able to simplify it. That's what mastery is where I'm able
Right.
to, I know the complexity so well that I'm seeing everything is kind of the same. And now I bring it back to center where I can make it as simple as possible. That's a very long journey.
Yeah.
And so the comparison piece is like, yeah, I want to maybe, I view the top as like inspiration, especially if I'm a beginner. And then I want to figure out like what are the next steps I need based on where I'm at. Okay.
Right.
So, I might need to get some counsel or some help that are gonna give me some good next step for based on that can meet me where I'm at. I'm not gonna be doing advanced stuff yet. And so really advanced stuff is always built on mastery of the foundations of the
Yeah.
beginner stuff, right? So we just do the beginner stuff over and over again until it's boring. And then you can start to build into advanced. So that's the thing is like if I'm looking too far out ahead of me, then it's going to be very easy for me to get to shut down, believe that I'm not good enough, believe that I need to be further along than I am. And then that's where I'm going to go into self-worth stuff of must not be cut out for this, or I'm not equipped to do this. But it's really like, no, I'm just not sticking with it long enough to see the fruits of it. So the comparison piece is like, yeah, I want to be, if I need some competition, I'm going to compare myself to maybe people that are similar in terms of their knowledge and
Right.
skill.
Yeah.
But then even that, it's like, that's more of just like, if I need an external focus to motivate me. Um, and so in that place, I never want to be too focused on anybody else other than myself, right? Because that's where the work is.
Right.
It's always going to be an internal process no matter what. But yeah, it's good to have some competition to kind of see where you stand. But even that we want to use as feedback is like, okay, I put this amount of work in it and it got me these results. And so what are some good next steps for me to continue to develop? Any sort of event or kind of showcase is going to be like, that's just for me to get data of like what it looks like when I put it under stress. Okay,
Sure.
and this is a key for athletes. It's like you can always get better,
Yeah.
at everything. But it's that ability to kind of quiet those thoughts that makes it feel like it's impossible. Okay, because
Yeah.
everything is a skill that can be developed, and that the number one question you want to ask yourself is this what I want to spend my time on? Because that's kind of the key piece of like if I'm going to develop something, I need to be able to stick with it over a long period of time. And I need to be able to problem solve anytime a challenge comes up in relationship to it so I can continue to refine that craft.
Right.
So it's this idea of like getting in our own way. Okay. So is my past getting in my way? Is focusing on other people? Is that what's getting in my way? Which is still me getting in my way because I'm giving
Yeah.
my focus to that. Are my expectations way out of alignment? All the time with clients is based on where you're at. These are the problems that exist at this level, right? And that's
Yeah.
perfect, right?
Right.
You're not going to be way up here. This is where you're at, and these are the problems of this area. So
Yeah.
you got to learn those to move to the next step, and that's like perfectly fine. But it's this not needing to be the finished product. right off the bat. A lot of times we only do that because I'm not feeling good enough inside. And I think that if I achieve this thing, it's going to make me feel better about myself. Okay. That's really where that comes from. But you feel better about yourself by building into that because you start to embody what it takes to operate that way.
Yeah.
So, we want to put the cart before the horse type of thing where it's, oh, I want all this stuff because that's going to make me feel better. But you feel really good about yourself when you get really good at something, right? Because now you're
Right.
expressing yourself to your fullest capacity. And that's always generally fulfilling.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm not going to like something in the beginning if I'm not very good at it, but that's probably the work I need to be doing is the stuff I'm dreading because that's what's going to allow me to bring it to another level. And then when I start to get good at it, now I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of a consistent theme that we've gone through as each week when we do podcasts, right? It's about that. It might mean doing the work that you're avoiding doing.
Mhm. You know, it's natural. We're all wired that way. It's like we want to avoid it. We want to work around it, but it's always just the simple, like logical thing at the end of the day. That's yeah, I'm avoiding this piece. This piece is necessary for what I want, but I yeah, I have pain attached to it. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the skills, right?
Right.
And that's why support is like very necessary in those areas because that's all the stuff we like dread doing, right? Let's say with this work, conceptually, like I basically help people face their darkness, right? And their
Right.
darkness
Yep.
is their pain. It's the things they want to avoid, right? And so it's putting messaging behind that is approachable. It's a challenge, right? But it's like I like to think I make it as approachable and easy as possible.
Yeah.
Is yeah, these things have like we don't want to look at them because they were like probably really painful at one point, but it's like once we look at it now, a lot of times it's not as scary as we thought it would be.
Right.
And it's like if I'm stuck with it trying to face it myself, I may always be running with it. But if somebody's like kind of holding my hand and walking me through it, now that's like much more manageable, right?
Yeah.
And so those are the things that where self-sabotage comes from is the parts we want to run from, the parts we want to avoid. Because every time I get confronted with that pain or this insecurity or this weakness, now my system basically wants to avoid it, have some sort of workaround. But those things only get you so far. And if I
Yeah.
want to maximize myself, that work's eventually going to have to get done. Like I can't avoid it.
Right. So I think like a lot of the things that we talk about, it's the kind of getting on that nervous system level. How would we think about it through that lens of as we regulate our nervous system and get to a good baseline, like how that helps solve the issues around self-sabotage?
The emotions from all these situations from our past that we keep bringing up, and that's the reason we keep talking about it is because it's stored in our body, which our nervous system. Okay.
Yeah.
As we confront these new things, if I have survival safety things attached to it, my nervous system's going to go on high alert, or it may, if something's very overwhelming, I might hit shutdown where I feel paralyzed and I can't move through things. I'm going to have some sort of either suppression or like redirection going on. Okay. And so part of it's understanding, okay, I'm doing something new. So I activated a pattern from the past and that pattern has a coping mechanism attached to it. So I've developed a strategy to relieve that stress based on my past. And that very much so may be the thing that's sabotaging us. Okay. Is this gets activated, it makes me feel this way. I want to run away. And so I can't sit with the discomfort. And that's where it's like, we've talked about before, creating this space where we can feel the stress, but then we can create some space where we start to observe it a little bit, being like, oh, is this actually right now? Like, is this real now? Or am I actually just feeling something from my past? Okay.
Right.
And because once our nervous system gets activated, we've trained it. And so if a survival instinct got activated, now my thinking goes to a pretty childish place, usually, right? It's usually I want to run away or, I can't handle this or whatever it is. and that can feel very intense in the body too. And so, that's where mindfulness practices, we learn to regulate the nervous system because it's getting us connected to the present. Meaning like I'm a fully grown adult, like, I have all these skills and abilities. I can handle this situation. But it might feel quite the opposite. It might feel
Right.
like I'm a kid and this is overwhelming and I don't know what to do here. Right.
Right.
And so that's this ability to sit with discomfort and take some deep breaths and really work on reprogramming how I'm relating to the situation. That's why it's in the moment, it's not always easy, right? Often in the beginning, when we start doing this work, it's nearly impossible. Okay. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's helpful to have a guide. But then also we start to develop some practices where we can kind of create some of that. Okay, the stress got activated in this situation. So
Yeah.
now when I'm going to go into an environment where it's safe, like let's say like I just go home and, you know, before I go to bed or whatever, and I might pull it up again. I might start thinking about it. And that's going to activate the feelings, but it's going to be less intense. Okay.
Sure.
Or I'm going to start getting some data of like, oh, and I'm going to start questioning it. That's where journaling, deep breathing, breathing into the sensations, feeling them, because these are the things I haven't allowed myself to feel.
Right.
It's like I was functioning in survival and I had to find a way through it. And I didn't have the skills to navigate it in a way where I regulated my nervous system or I returned it back to safety. Right. And
Right.
so we question it, we take some deep breaths, and we really want to reflect on like, is this still valid for my life now? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, is my thinking around the situation, is it rational? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big key. If my reaction is very disproportional to whatever the situation is, that's a sign that there's some trauma or some pain behind it, where it's a level 10, but the situation was a 2. That means I've got some work to do, but that's gonna be I probably need to heal some things from my past. And that means I need to shift my perspective about how I'm seeing that situation now in the present. It's
Right.
not the same thing as it was when I was a kid. Okay. I have more power, more agency over my life now. And so I can make these adjustments and I can get my nervous system to be in alignment. If the situation's a 2, I want my nervous system to be like a 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want it to be through the roof. And that's going to be based on that feeling sensation. And so we really have to give ourselves permission to feel in order to get that data. Of
Yeah.
it's through like relationship and people around us, they could be like, "Hey, like, what happened there?" That might call some attention to be like, "Well, like, yeah, why did I act that way? Like, why did I, have this huge response to something that might not have been that big?" Right?
Right.
So it's these awareness practices where I start to ask these deeper questions about, yeah, why am I showing up the way I'm showing up? Why am I hiding? Why am I not speaking up? Yeah, if I'm in a tense situation, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to run away?
Yeah.
Fight or flight, the male version might be, I want to fight now, right?
Right. Yeah.
But,
Yep.
if something like feels negative, like that might give me an adrenaline rush where I'm like, oh, I need to go fight now, right? So it's just
Yeah.
like, and it's going to be based on our judgment of the situation. So whatever I believe about that situation, my nervous system's programmed to respond in accordance with that.
Right.
So regulation is this idea of like I'm bringing it up to date with my current reality, and if I'm having these huge responses to things, I'm very reactionary, and I feel like I can't control it. That means I don't have any power over that situation actually, because it's
Yeah.
all just a pre-programmed response. And so I need to start to slow down that process, and I do that by questioning it. I get a little
Right.
bit curious about it. This is how we start to manage emotions is like I give myself permission to feel them and then I learn about them. And as I learn about my emotions, now I can respond in different ways or I can adjust my life to better suit me where I'm at now. So many things just start off as default settings from like whatever your childhood was. Of this is just the way things are done. But if
Right.
that's constant stress, if that's not getting you the results you want, like all that stuff, like there is going to be a lot of sabotage mixed into that
Yeah.
because our mind simply just wants to keep all the same things going. We need pattern interrupts. And so that means like I need to get into my conscious mind. Okay. So my conscious mind, I don't have access to those faculties when I'm in stress. So that's why I need to, if I got stressed during the day and it wasn't an appropriate place to go sort it out, okay, I need to get in a relaxed setting at some point in that day or then within a few days. And I need to readdress that, being like, okay, well, like now that I know I'm safe and I'm in a calm environment, I can use my conscious mind to zero in on these things where I have big reactions, and I can start to shave some layers off of the energy behind them by questioning them, being like, yeah, why do I
Yeah.
act that way? And the more we understand it, at the bottom of it's gonna be just like, I have this core fear, or I have this wound that like is basically redirecting me because it's painful or it doesn't want me to stay there. Okay.
Yeah.
But by walking through that, we start to regulate the system because I'm no longer fearing that thing. Okay. And so it is a bit of a journey. And so it's these strategies of like, oh yeah, I'm emotionally wiped out. I need to give some attention to that to start to get more efficient with how I'm using my energy. So when I dip into a survival pattern, that's going to be eating up a ton of energy, but also it makes it impossible for me to change
Yeah.
because I'm simply just working on, I have all these workarounds where I just continually take the same actions over and over again. And because I don't really have control over that. As we balance out our nervous system, we're starting to gain self control. Okay. And when I have self control, now I can start to choose things rather than just simply reacting to things.
Cool. So thinking about this idea, moving through the self-sabotage, what are kind of your final thoughts around this topic?
Well, I think the first piece would be to realize that we all self-sabotage,
Yeah.
but we all
Yes.
have blind spots. There's no point in which I set a goal and I just go through it without getting off track in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And so the number one thing is like having a little bit of self-compassion, but we really do want to start to create the awareness around it and ask those questions of like, why do I do these things? And why don't I feel like I'm making progress towards what I want? And so as we ask those questions, it's going to be this ability to sit with some discomfort and actually change our thoughts around situations. Every path forward is going to take a new level of thinking
Yeah.
because that's where we're responding from. So it's allowing yourself to feel things. It's allowing yourself to question them, and the good question is how the person I want to become or this goal I want to achieve. Like, who do I need to become to achieve that? And then what would that person think? How would they behave? What would those actions look like? Right.
Right.
And so we're trying to line ourselves up with that. And so, that is the people that do it really well. We try to get some insights on like how do they carry themselves? Like how do they go about their business? Because that's going to be a pretty good recipe for how to get there.
Yeah.
And so if I'm really far off of that, okay, what areas are completely disconnected from that? Because that's going to be like pulling me way off track. And I just want to take a deeper look and what do I need to do in order to line up with this? And so that might be doing some healing work. That might be doing some self-reflection. And it's always going to be a humbling process where I'm going to have to put my ego in check a little bit and realize that, hey, maybe I'm not that far along in this area. Maybe I need some work. Maybe I need some help. All those things, can factor into the equation.
Right.
So it's, awareness, self-compassion, understanding that there is a process to everything and that, you can improve pretty much anything you want. It's just going to take this ability to work through that discomfort and level up your mindset and your emotions around that subject. That's what's going to allow you to embody things better to show up in the way you need to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. So if you're wanting to go deeper with me and learn more about my work, you can visit brandonthelk.com. And within there, I do one-to-one coaching and I also have the Lightning Lab. It's a 3 month group coaching program in which we're going to be focusing on authentic confidence. So that's really building this foundation of how to work through challenges in a way that makes you stronger and more confident and more sure of yourself. So if you have any interest in that, just go ahead and reach out. You can DM me on Instagram at Evolved Athlete, or just schedule a strategy session on my website and then we can talk more about that.
Yeah. Awesome. And we'll make sure like all of the links to everything are in the show notes, both on Spotify and Apple, but also on YouTube. Yeah. So any way that you can connect with the podcast or Brandon, all of that'll be there.
All right. Well, yeah, hopefully you guys got some value out of today and have a little more perspective on, maybe some of these self-sabotaging behaviors you have. And yeah, if you need help working through those, definitely continue to listen and reach out if you need some deeper work. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah. Awesome. Talk to you later, Brandon.
All right. Bye.